Hi, I'm Mike Bellevue. I'm the black powder editor for Guns of the Old West magazine. And today we're going to be shooting a Smith & Wesson Schofield revolver. This one is nickel plated from a birdie. It's chambered for 45 Colt, but of course the original shot 45 Schofield. And we'll go through some of the features of this gun and we'll do some shooting with it. About a week before making this video, I was out in Wyoming and Montana, Nebraska. Kind of made a Western tour, which was great, and I absolutely loved Wyoming. The scenery is fantastic. Had a great time, and it really got me thinking about the Virginian. And if you're my age, you're probably familiar with the television show that was on called The Virginian, but if you're a literary person, you have hopefully read the Virginian book, which I think is the greatest Western of all time. And the Virginian, of course, was the foreman on Judge Henry's ranch, and that was located outside of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. So going through Wyoming really brought the Virginian to mind. And I read the Virginian back when I was 12 years old, and it really impressed me. I've read it probably a dozen times since then, because it was written in 1902 or 1903, and it's not based on research, it's based on being there. And you can just feel the authenticity in it. The language is a little bit tough, but once you get used to it, it flows very well. And Owen Wister, who wrote it, he spent a lot of time in the West, and he wrote about things that he saw. And it's a fantastic book. But one of the big shockers for me in the Virginian is there's a point where he's attacked by Indians who get off the reservation. You never read about that attack, just the aftermath. And his sweetheart, the school marm from Vermont, finds him wounded and possibly still being pursued by the Indians. And she brings him to safety, and she reloads his pistol. And in the book, it describes how she breaks it open and ejects the shells and reloads them. And I thought, break it open? Cowboy pistols don't break open. I mean, at 12 years old, I was a Western arms expert, because every show on TV, they were all Westerns. And I loved Western guns even then. In fact, I can't remember not playing with toy single actions. So I knew everything about Western guns, and they didn't break open. I mean, they had a loading gate on the right-hand side, and you loaded cartridges one at a time from the rear. I had no idea. So I got on my bike, and I rode into town, and I went to the library, and I found a book on gun collecting. And sure enough, I found these Smith & Wesson break-top revolvers and found out how common they were and started researching things. And that opened up my eyes to the fact that, 1892 Winchesters and Colt single-action revolvers were not the only guns out in the West. And it opened up a whole new world for me of Western firearms. And I really owe all that to the Virginian. So, in honor of the Virginian, I think I'm going to put my Schofield through the paces. Now, he might not have had a Schofield. In fact, odds are that he did not. He probably had a Smith & Wesson New Model number 3, or maybe a Smith & Wesson American, maybe even a Russian, but he could have had a Schofield. I mean, there were a few of them around in civilian hands. Though this gun was never that popular a weapon. They did not sell that many of them. But let's take it out and see what it'll do. A book can change your life. And as I said, the Virginian turned me on to the fact that Colt single-action armies weren't the only guns on the Western frontier. And the Virginian owned a break-top revolver, and that was undoubtedly a Smith & Wesson. And it could have been a Schofield, like we see here, though probably not, because they only made about 25,000 of them. More than half of them went to the U.S. Army. So more than likely, it was either a Smith & Wesson Russian, which you see here on top, or a new model number 3, which you see here on the bottom, which was Smith & Wesson's final and most refined single-action revolver of the 19th century. But it could have been any of these 3 guns, and they're all very, very similar. The Smith & Wesson Russian model is the gun that really made the company financially sound. The Russian government placed huge orders for this pistol during the 1870s. And they insisted on some kind of quirky design features too, like the huge pawl above the grip and the spur on the trigger guard. Because of these features, the gun was not nearly as popular as it could have been out west, and dealers were always asking for a return to the earlier Smith & Wesson American grip, which is, with some slight modifications, what the Schofield uses. They always said this gun would have sold much better if Smith & Wesson had returned to that grip. The Smith & Wesson Schofield was the brainchild of Major George Schofield of the 10th Cavalry. And he got a financial piece of every one of these guns that Smith & Wesson made, which is another reason why Smith & Wesson did not push them as hard as they could have, because they were working on their new Model 3 revolver, which they'd get all the money for. But besides a return to the American grip, Schofield's contribution was 2 innovations. One was the cartridge, which was a .45 caliber cartridge truncated from the government model, and you can see it here. It's about a tenth of an inch smaller. And the latch to keep the top brake closed, and we'll show you how that works. On every other Smith & Wesson revolver, except the Schofield, the latch that keeps the action closed is mounted right on the top strap of the frame. And in order to open the revolver, you pull up on that latch. And really, it takes 2 hands to open most Smith & Wesson revolvers. One to hold the grip, and the other one to pull up on that latch and break the revolver open. What George Schofield did that was different is he moved the latch to the frame of the revolver. And you pull it back with your thumb. So you put the revolver on half cock, pull the latch back with your thumb, and you can open the gun with one hand. You can flip it open with a jerk, or you can push the barrel against your thigh, and all the cartridges fly out, and you can reload. So it's a much better option for a mounted shooter, a cavalry rider. The problem is, with a lot of holsters, you can hit that latch accidentally, and you draw the gun, and it opens up, and all your cartridges spill on the ground, and that's not a good thing. El Paso Saddlery makes some great holsters for Schofields, or for any break tops for that matter. But this Schofield rig of theirs, plain Jane, but excellent. You can get it, of course, carved or any way you want. And it's cut out around the top strap specifically so it won't hit that latch, which is incredibly handy. And then this other holster rig is their Jesse James rig. And this is carved with an authentic design from the 1870s. It's a beautiful, beautiful rig. And if you're going to carry Schofields, this is absolutely something you should look into. Ultimately, Schofields did not provide a whole lot of competition to Colt and their single-action Army revolver. But they were very good, solid 6 guns, and they're still a lot of fun to shoot. So let's take this one to the range, and we'll show you what it can do. Due to their design, with their long frame, with a long reach to small hammer, Smith & Wesson revolvers are slower to shoot for me than Colt revolvers. But in the 19th century, they were known as shooters' revolvers, where the Colts were fighting revolvers. And as you can see, they're very accurate guns. They will absolutely get the job done. I enjoy Schofields. I like the look of them. I like shooting them. But I'm going to be honest with you. If it was 1880, and I could only own one revolver, it would be a Colt single-action Army, not a Schofield. But still, they're a lot of fun to shoot, and they can definitely get the job done. Well, here's a loser's eye view of a gunfight, but I thought I'd give you a break from all the smoke. So this time, I'm shooting .45 Colt smokeless ammo.